Hello and welcome to Special Stage 4, Rally Sport Magazine's 4th edition of our Special Stage podcast. I'm Luke Whitten. With me here is Peter Whitten, who is sitting at home while I'm doing the lucky stuff. How are you?
Yeah, I'm going well, Luke, and you've had a long, busy day.
Yeah, the day's still going. I'm at the Dog on the Tucker box near Gundagai on the way home from the ARC test day. Well, it's not the official ARC test day, but quite a few regulars were there in attendance. So we'll be delving into that, no doubt.
Yeah, let's get into it then. How did it go? I mean, obviously the weather up there looked to be nice and fine and sunny.
It was fine and sunny, but I guess early autumn, it was quite cold. It was only about 19 degrees. It was lucky the sun was out. But again, like typical Canberra, it was rocky and it was dusty. So I'm really not surprised that a lot of the top guys didn't do all that many runs. The Bateses in particular finished up maybe around midday because, yes, they know the roads. Yes, they know the cars themselves. And it was really just a shakedown for those cars, particularly Harry's car that's been rebuilt.
Yeah, I'd like to know more, though, Luke, about Jamie Luff, who debuted the brand new jet black GR Yaris AP4. How did he get on?
He went on pretty well. He was smiling from ear to ear all day. So he really enjoyed his time. He wasn't making any setup changes or anything like that with the car. He was just looking to get into it, get used to the left-hand drive and kick things off, because I guess his struggle is moving from a production-based car into an AP4 car, which, like the many people who've done it before, they know it's a faster car, but really it's chalk and cheese, the two different things.
Yeah, and from your understanding, having been at the test day today, is the car in the same spec as the Bates' cars? Obviously, it was built in Canberra at the Neil Bates Motorsport operation.
Yeah, there were mixed reports early on when the car was first announced as to what specs it will run, but Jamie told me today that yes, the specs are exactly the same as what the GR Yaris AP4 factory cars are, so it's the same engine package from Germany, but there's a few little things here and there, but I guess that comes with different cars as well. So they're not exactly the same, but 99% of the cars pretty well similar.
Yeah, and the first generation Toyota Yaris AP4 car in the hands of James Dimmick for the first time on in the Forest. How did he look?
Yeah, he looked pretty good. He was well and truly on it, I think. He got to grips with the car much better as the day went on, understandably, like the others who were there. But yeah, he was on the pace, I think, and really enjoyed his time too. Alongside him was Larissa Bigger, who's co-driving for him at the first round in Launceston. So she was also happy to be back in the car, and they were working really well as a team.
And what about Tom Clark and Ryan Preston? They were there in the rebuilt Ford Fiesta R5 after their big crash in Tassie last year.
Yeah, that's right. They were having a good day as well. It was just a pretty good test day, to be honest. Nice and laid back. The left-hand side of the car where it was damaged last year, that's been all repaired, obviously. The certification has been done for homologation. Obviously, it's an R5 car, so they had to get all the technical certification and stuff like that to get the cage all right again. It's all white on that left-hand side now. The car isn't 100% finished, but what Tom and Ryan wanted to do was just get out there and get the car going and make sure it was all spick and span, ready to go for the first round. And clearly they'll do the Thursday test day before Launceston, but today was really just about getting in the car and getting some miles.
Yeah, another guy in a brand new car for him for this year is Troy Dowell, and I believe he was there obviously in the Skoda that Harry Bates drove at Rally New Zealand last year, having his first run in the car. Did you see much of that?
No, I didn't see much of that. He was done quite early in the day. I would say maybe it would have been 11 o'clock, so at a maximum 2 hours of work for Troy. I'm not sure how many runs he did, but yeah, they were packed up and gone pretty quickly. So whether Troy was happy with the car and just wanted to move on and get into Tasmania, I'm not sure. But yeah, the car looked good the one time that I did see it. So yeah, I believe all is well.
And what about another new a new G4 car that was there for Mick Paddon? I'm getting all these AP4s and G4s mixed up. It's a bit confusing at times.
It is a bit. I spoke to Mick at length, actually, and we're going to do a feature on that car. But it's, really really interesting thing. It looks a little bit different to what we might expect from a G4 car, because all of our G4 cars in Australia have come from Poland typically, and Mick's is a little bit different in terms of it's an entirely home job, more or less. His business has built it, and they've really hit the nail on the head. It sounds good, it looks good, and from what I believe, it was really, really reliable today. So they're pretty happy too.
And like the other G4 cars, is it running Mitsubishi running gear?
Yeah, so it's running Mitsubishi Evo 10 running gear. So he said that he's still got his Evo 10 that he's run previously that used to be in Repco colours. So what he did was he used his spares package essentially and put that into the new Ford Fiesta. So he's still got that Evo 10 there, which he's going to use for spares and whatnot whenever he needs them.
Yeah, that's great, Luke. And speaking of the ARC, we're recording this on Wednesday afternoon, but by the time this comes out on Thursday, it will have been announced that TV coverage is continuing for the ARC on Channel 7 this year with the live E-Road Power Stage, which is great news, and also a highlights package on 7 Plus, I think, and 7 Mate after the event. So good news that the ARC is still going to be featured on free-to-air TV.
That's right, and we'll get to see Jess Dane and Dean Herridge again on the screens of Channel 7 and the like. So they did a really good job last year and over the past few years. And as always, the television coverage is going to go from strength to strength and, yeah, improve throughout the season.
And I think that the quality at the top of the field of the entry list in Tasmania is going to make it for really good coverage this year. And, we're all really looking forward to that event in only a couple of weeks' time.
Yeah, it's going to come up very, very quickly. Moving on from the ARC test day, the Mitta Mountain Rally was run and won last weekend. You were there. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Obviously, It was a Victorian round and a New South Wales round.
It was, yeah. So a full field of 80 cars. I think they got about 95 entries initially and had to have a bunch of reserves. A few cars didn't start for obviously various reasons, but the event was pretty well run, I think. A little bit of a disappointment that they only ran 4 of the 6 stages. That was because Adrian Stratford had a massive crash on the second stage of the event, which we'll get to in a moment. But the overall winner of the event was Tim Wilkins and Jim Gleeson, Lancer Evo 9 from New South Wales. They were dominant over the day and clearly looked faster than anybody else. The event was in warm, dusty conditions. It was probably 29, 30 degrees. So dust was a bit of a problem in the forest areas, but Tim won by, I think, over 3 minutes in the end. So really, really dominant from him.
In terms of the VRC field, Tim Clark in a Subaru won, but there was a couple of two-wheel drive cars on the podium as well, I think, which really shows how tough the Mitta roads are.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, Tim Clark, he certainly deserved the victory. He's not what you would call one of the quickest drivers as far as outright winning speed goes in the VRC normally, but quite a few cars fell by the wayside with mechanical issues and a few other bits and pieces, and Tim was there at the finish. But Kev Millard and a Datsun 1600 of all cars finished second in the event for the VRC, and Nick Seymour in a Ford Fiesta R2, he finished third. And I think that's a car that you actually co-drove in at one stage, Luke.
I'll have to think back and look at that. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. There's a couple of white R2s that are floating around the country, so yeah, I'm not sure if that's the one or if it's another one, but yeah, it's a very, very well sorted package, I guess, the R2 car. So it's always going to be reliable. And like they showed at the weekend, if some people can fall by the wayside, you never know what kind of results you can get.
Yeah, and I think in the VRC, Hyundai XLs finished 4th and 5th as well. So there weren't too many four-wheel drive cars that survived the conditions. So that just goes to show that, as you say, you've just got to be in it to win it. So good on those guys for finishing so highly up the order.
Absolutely. We'll touch briefly on Adrian Stratford's crash, which has taken a lot of the discussion in terms of rallying over the past week or so. It was a big crash, and first of all, we're grateful that Adrian and Kane are okay. But it was a big incident, and they shared the onboard this morning to the world. You've spoken to him at length, I believe, Peter. How's he going?
Well, I've messaged him quite a lot since the crash. Adrian's in a neck brace, so he's unable to actually hold the phone up to his ear. So he's been doing a lot of texting and messaging, and yeah, they're okay, relatively speaking, I think. I mean, they've both got multiple spinal fractures. Kane's had surgery. He's in the Alfred Hospital in Melbourne. So we wish him all the best for a speedy recovery. Adrian got off a little bit lighter, I guess you might say. He's back home in Bendigo, but he's going to have, I think, 6 weeks in a neck brace and 12 weeks in a back brace. So both the guys have got long road ahead of them as far as recovery goes. So we wish them all the best. But as you mentioned, Luke, it was a really fast crash. They just before they went off the road, they were in sixth gear. It was a deceptive corner, I guess. The car went off, and it looked to be Adrian looked as though he might have saved it, but there was a big culvert in the paddock, and it just end for end of the car multiple times. Fortunately, the roll cage survived perfectly from all reports, but the medical crews and the rescue crews needed to get in and actually cut the roof off the car, cut the roll cage out so that both guys could be extracted from the car, and then they were helicoptered to hospital in Melbourne. So it was quite a big operation, and I think it just goes to prove that the safety, not only the safety bits and pieces in the cars that we have these days, but also the rescue procedures that go on in ARC events and VRC events and other state rounds. They're first class with the Rally Safe and the medical interventions team. So, and Adrian has said this in his social media posts, but we're certainly grateful that that they got out of that crash as well as they did.
Absolutely. And it just goes to show that you've got to build your car well to start with, because, you know, there's only one time you can put the roll cage in the car and all those other little things. So you make sure you build it right the first time. And if you're unlucky enough to have a crash like that, then you've got the best chance.
Yes, definitely. And Adrian did mention today that he was so very grateful that he had stuff like the FIA door foam in the doors. He had the proper seat mounts and things like that, which actually made a huge difference in the crash, because it was a monumental accident. And I've written an article that's coming out on the website today, and it's more about the difficulties that organisers have with blind rallies where they're using shire roads and shire roads that the roads are difficult to read often because they're in paddock areas or open farmland. And it's a real tricky one. And that road in particular where Adrian crashed has seen 3 major accidents over the last few years. So that's certainly going to be a talking point within car clubs and with directing teams over the next few months, I would imagine.
So far on the podcast, we haven't mentioned who our guest is, but if you've picked it up on the show notes or in the title, we've got Hayden Paddon coming up. I spoke to him before he left for Europe. He's currently there, and I believe once this episode comes out, he will have tested the i20 N Rally2 over there. He's got a big weekend coming up and a big campaign. It's going to be great to see him at the top of the ERC field and really chase that championship.
It sure is. And I really did enjoy your interview with him, Luke. And Hayden gives quite a lot of insight into competing in Europe and why he's doing the European Championship rather than the WRC2 program. And also the way that he's got to set up the car for his own use over there. Obviously, he's leasing a car for the event and for the championship. And it's a really interesting listen.
That's right. And his Rally 2 car, the one that he competed on at Rally New Zealand, is staying in New Zealand for the year. So he's most likely going to be using that at the Otago Rally. So he speaks about that and where that might help him throughout the year. So, yeah, I recommend you keep listening and tune into that.
It's going to be really interesting this weekend to follow the European Championship, the first round. As Colin Clark mentioned in one of his podcasts the other day, I mean, I've never taken much interest in the ERC over the years. Often there's a lot of guys who you don't know their names or you can't pronounce their names. But this year, when you see the entry list for the first event in Portugal, I think they highlighted yesterday that there's 13 drivers who are national champions last year or champions of some description. It's quite phenomenal. And you've got guys like Hayden and Craig Breen and Mads Osberg and Pontus Tiedemann. I mean, it's just going to make for a fantastic rally.
Yeah, I think I'll be watching the ERC a bit more than usual this weekend, that's for sure. And the Taree Rally as well was the first of the AMSAG rallies this year. It was won by a former Australian champion who's, again, looking to go to Launceston and shake things up at the front of the ARC field. But he had a great weekend as well in that Hyundai G4.
He did, yeah. Nathan Quinn picked up I guess what you call a pretty comprehensive win in his Hyundai as expected. Quinn is a bit of a tough one to read at times. He did tell us there 2 or 3 weeks ago that he's going to be running that event in the Mazda RX-2, but he obviously appeared in the Hyundai and did pretty well. Another guy of note, which we should mention, was Dean Ridge, who was driving the ex-Richie Dalton Ford Fiesta Proto G4. First time that Dean's run that car, and he was running second outright, and I think he's had a puncture or something like that towards the end of the day and dropped back. So it was good to see him in that car, and bodes well for the future.
Yeah, I think it might have been a turbo hose that blew off on the Fiesta, but that's right. It's great to see the cars move hands and move around the country, and yeah, they stay on the stages, which is really, really great to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And the AMSAG series, I think the event had 48 to 50 entries on Saturday, which was a tremendous effort for them. Quite a few guys regularly doing the AMSAG series who weren't competing. I know Jake Bramble, he had a couple of other things on. He's a regular there. He'll be back later in the year. But when you think 50 entries for an AMSAG event, and a bit further south, we had 80 entries for the Mid-Mountain rallies. So rallying down the East Coast is certainly in good health at the moment.
That's right. It's hard not to agree with that at the moment. There's lots of rallying to come. And there's one more bit of news too that you're going to reveal, Peter, on the podcast, that there's going to be a new event towards the end of the year on the Victorian calendar.
There is, Luke. Yeah. This is an event that's being run by the HRA, the Historic Rally Association. It's called the Southern Classic Rally. It's going to run in November. We've got full details coming on the website today as well. I spoke to John Roberts, who's the director today, and it's going to be a great event. It's 250 kilometres competitive for two-wheel drive historic cars. It's also around the Victorian Club Rally Series, and they're building up for something very special for next year as well. It's going to be a 3-day event next year. So jump onto the website and read the story, and you'll find out all about it.
Did you indicate whether that 3-day rally might be something towards the Alpine Rally for the year after? Because we know that there's a bit of conjecture as to where the Alpine Rally sits at the minute.
No, the Alpine Rally will definitely run in the Lakes Entrance area again in 2025, but I believe that the Historic Rally Association, they're keen for an event to run every 2 years on alternate years to the Alpine. So this is the reasoning behind this rally, and hence the November date.
Fantastic. Well, there's lots to look forward to, and we'll call it a podcast for our little section here at the start, Peter. We'll get into the chat with Hayden Paddon, which I'm sure you'll enjoy. And until next fortnight, we'll see you later.
No worries, Like, you go and give that dog on the tucker box a pat, and have a safe drive home.
Will do. Speak soon. Hayden Paddon, welcome along. We're lucky to have you along as our guest today. I look at what you're doing and where you're going in the world, and I really can't find where there's a gap. So I appreciate your time. Are you well, and are you looking forward to heading over to Europe again?
Yeah, well, like you say, it's actually snuck up on us so quick. There's just been so much going on, and I think, well, we're into March now, is just crazy. So our off season seems to have been quite short with so many different things going on. But just looking forward to getting back in the car again, to be honest, in Portugal. And the first part of our season is pretty jam packed, but I think the year's gonna whiz by, and we'll be summing up the end of the year, how it all went in no time.
Do you feel like you're ever sitting still, like you're going to Europe and then it's back to Australia, then it's the Otago Rally? Does it feel like you're forever on the move?
Yeah, we're sort of going through 6 events in 6 weeks right now, between a whole lot of promo stuff, like the Gulf Open this week, and then obviously off to Portugal straight after that, and then into Adelaide, Australia, into Rally Otago. We've got a Hill Climb Champs in New Zealand, and we've got a weekend demonstration event over Easter. So we would have only just started the season by April, but we'd probably already be half worn out, to be fair. So, but hey, I love it. I love being busy. If anything, you probably don't get enough time to just sit still and enjoy the moment. But in saying that, I get bored very easily as well. So I guess I'm a pretty hard person to keep happy.
As first port of call, we'll cover off on Paddon Rally Sport, or I guess now as it's called, Paddon Racing Group. It's expanding. Can you explain the setup there? How many people you have, and sort of what projects you're working on at the minute before the season?
Yeah, obviously we're a small business. We're trying to grow. Ultimately, that's what I'm trying to set up here, so we can run our own motorsport programs around the world. That's the dream. I guess essentially a mini M Sport or an mini Pro Drive, and that's what I want to sort of grow into. And that may mean in the future we may have to have some bases in Europe as well, because New Zealand is what I'm passionate about, and that's where I want to have our base. But logistically, we'll have to have long term some other places around the world as well to set ourselves up. But yeah, we're just working on. We have a lot of very good customers here at the moment that trust us and the work that we're doing. So we're always really trying to push with our guys on reliability. So we're always just trying to make sure all our customer cars are reliable. And that's really the biggest thing around that is the motivation is to have customers enjoy the sport. I've seen it too often. People come into the sport and they have cars that just keep giving them problems and they lose motivation and they go away. And that's our sport needs numbers. It needs people from grassroots all the way up. So the biggest motivation behind that is not the financial aspect, because the financial aspect in a motorsport business is not that beneficial, but it's about encouraging more competitors. And then long term, we'll be more of a tech motorsport business and obviously using our EV car to, I guess, position ourselves as a go-to, whether it be with FIA or control championships around the world where we can provide tech solutions within motorsport. So yeah, we're growing. We're 11 people here now, and we've run out of space in the shed, so we need a bigger shed. So we're going through a whole lot of growing pains at the moment.
They're good problems to have. The R5 and AP4 cars that are in the shed, as you say, there's more and more now in New Zealand. It's great for the sport. Obviously, they're everywhere around the world. They're sort of getting to the corners of the globe where they weren't previously. How do you see those cars in the scheme of the New Zealand Rally Championship and New Zealand rallying in general? How are they fitting in?
Yeah, well, I think they've obviously got a place. I think the benefit of the Rally 2 or R5 cars is the ease for people to drive them. You don't have to really go through a big setup or development regime because it's already been done, by all the test programs in Europe. So, like personally, I love the AP4s because you can fiddle with them more. You can do more engineering. You got a bit more freedom. They are a little bit more backshed, so maybe not quite as refined. The R5 is maybe better suspension, better chassis, more refined. They've each got their pros and cons, but I like having both those cars here. We're looking at using the R5 car simply from a commercial perspective because it's a new car. The AP4 is quite an old car now, so we've got to weigh up all the pros and cons. But we know the R5 car's probably quicker on slow to medium speed stages, and AP4 is probably quicker when it's fast. So yeah, they've both got their pros and cons. It's good to see the R5's getting out much of a muchness in terms of buy price for the cars. Where we see a big difference is the maintenance costs of the cars. The R5 parts are more expensive than AP4, and that's where we see a massive difference in maintaining the cars.
Do you know whether you'll be able to compete in the New Zealand Rally Championship this year? I know there's only, I think, one date clash from what I know about your calendar. I think that's South Canterbury. Will you look to do a lot of the NZRC stuff this year?
Yeah, we'll do as much of it as we can. It's quite important for us and our partners. We've got 30 corporate partners on board this year, and the interest for them is what we do in New Zealand. At the end of the day, they're selling products and services, and their customer base and everything's here in New Zealand. They don't get a lot of value if we're competing on the other side of the world. So we have to compete here as much as we can. We've got to do as many ride days, PR days. And to be honest, I don't need much of an excuse to be here. We've got the best roads in the world. So, yeah, I'll always drive here as much as we can.
So that means an even busier Paddon racing group for this year. There's a couple of classics that are in the workshop. The two Group A legends that I've seen in there on some videos and stuff, the Escort and the Impreza. You would have dreamed about those cars growing up. What's it like to have them in the shed at the minute and have them worked on for customers and whatnot?
Yeah, well, obviously, when the customer cars, you sort of just look at them in envy, really. So, but yeah, of course, it's always a privilege that we get to see all sorts of cars through here. Classics, modern, circuit, rally. It's pretty cool. I've got a small involvement with the Subaru that's here, so it's quite cool to be able to get your hands on that. Like that Impreza is my dream car. It's not a proper pro drive car, but it is a replica. It's made to look like it, so it's pretty close for a fraction of the price. But it sounds right for me. Those Group A Imprezas were all about that sound and the anti-lag and the close ratio gearboxes, and it's got all of that. So it's a very cool car. Yeah, I don't need no $1 million supercar. That there is my dream car. So it's pretty cool to have that in the workshop.
Now, before we move to ERC, you teased some time ago. Gee, I'm trying to think back when it might be when the idea first came up, but there was a Hyundai Pony in your workshop area. I did spot a shape similar to a pony in a video recently. Does that mean that the project might be coming along a little bit?
It is coming along. It's a little bit slower than what we would have liked, just simply because we're so busy. there was an original idea of making it into a classic rally car, which I quite like the idea of, like put a BDA engine or something in it and go classic rallying. But that might have to come later on because we're looking at an electrification project with that. So maybe not so exciting in the motorsport world, but on the business tech side, that's where there is a bit of focus. So we're hoping to have it up and running by mid-year or late year, but certainly this year that'll be a fully restored car ready to go.
Will that be like a Hyundai New Zealand promo car, more or less, rather than a competition car?
It'll be a bit of a promo car, but it'll be more of like our own PRG promo car to showcase what we can do from a tech and personnel sort of things.
On to Europe. You explained it briefly when the program was announced, but for our listeners, I guess, who might have missed it, why the ERC and not a WRC2 program?
Well, two things: finances and the ability to be able to be in a position to win rallies. Last year, obviously, dabbling in the WRC2 a bit, there was a couple of things that come to fruition a bit, and the fact that it was more expensive than we initially budgeted. Like we thought we had our budgets reasonably on the safe side and still doing it on a shoestring, but we still weren't enough. We spent a lot more than what we anticipated. And then the value what you're getting from that, from my point of view as a driver, like I'm not a young driver now trying to come up through the ranks and prove myself to the factory teams. I'm done with that. I'm not trying to get back in the WRC. I'm trying to now do this with our own New Zealand team and keep our team over there and keep our name over there. So therefore, when you weigh it all up, and when we're over there trying to win a class on a rally, just doesn't do the same for me as trying to win a rally. So naturally, when you're at WRC, you're playing second fiddle to the Rally 1 cars. The roads are destroyed by the time you get there in the Rally 2 cars. And it does become a bit of a lottery as well, to even if you can finish some of these rough gravel rallies. So, it's a lot of money to find. Like it was over 2 million Kiwi to do a full WRC2 program nowadays, a lot of money to find to be potentially parked up on the side of the road due to the roads were too rough, for example. So I love the idea of ERC. Super tough competition. We've seen with the entry list for this first rally. And, it ain't going to be easy, but at least we can compete to be at the front. Everyone who's going along to the rally, whether it be spectators, media, or whatnot, they're there to report on the Rally 2 cars because that is the showpiece. So at the end of the day, when you're spending seven figures and putting together a seven-figure budget, you want to get value out of it from a driver, from a team perspective. And, we're trying to ramp up to something for 2025 as a team. So that's why it's important that we keep our name over there and keep pushing forward.
Absolutely. The competition will be very hot in that first round. A question comes to mind about your ERC program is which car is being used? Now, I don't mean which brand of car, but is your i20N Rally 2 being shipped over from New Zealand, or is it a European-based car that you'll drive?
No, so we're working with an Italian team called BRC, so we'll be using their car. So our car's still here at the moment, working out the next steps with it. But it gives us the potential to be doing the double the development work. So we've got a car here that we can be doing testing and development with, learning some stuff here with it that we can transfer to the car overseas. We haven't worked with the BRC team before, but we're very much running an open relationship between us and them. So already what we've developed on our car here, we'll take that forward to Portugal as a bit of a starting base and then work collectively together. We've got some support out of Hyundai Motorsport customer racing this year, which is nice for the first time in several years. So it's good to have a little bit of that support there to help us as well. And collectively between BRC, Hyundai Motorsport customer racing, and Pirelli in a championship that's dominated by a red tyre brand, we are there to try and win a championship. So yeah, it's going to be tough, but if we all work together, then we'll try and make that possible.
So transitioning to another car, I'm talking about the BRC Hyundai. You spent, I guess, 2022 getting to grips with your car. Now, what's the process for you to get the separate car right? They're the same car under the same specs, of course. But my understanding is you change dampers and everything like that in your car. Do you give the direct specifications to BRC who'll equip that new car exactly the same way?
Yeah, they'll do. Like we're working collectively together. So at the end of the day, we'll probably learn some stuff from them as well. So it's not a closed book situation from us. So we're taking our dampers with us for this first rally to see where we're at, to see what we can learn on. We've already sent all our diff specs over. So they'll set up the diffs as we started, but then they've got some other suggestions that we'll test. And then vice versa. If we find some good stuff while we're over there, then that might be stuff we can transfer back to our car. So having the two cars running in two different parts of the world is going to help, I guess, speed up the process quite remarkably.
When you get in that car in Portugal, will it be very similar to, I guess, your New Zealand car? I'm talking just in layman's terms here. They're different cars, but with those specs exactly the same. Will you get in it and think, oh, perfect, this is exactly like the New Zealand car, or is there always little things that are different?
No, it's exactly the same as when we were in the WRC team. Like we're always in different chassis, different cars. I think you might have drove 5 different cars throughout the season, but from the outside it looked like the same car. So it's the same here. You see the basic things like your seat positions, the specs of the pedal box, the steering column. Then once you get your suspension and diffs and things in it, other than maybe where they might have the toolkit in the car and the rattle gun and things, pretty much other than that, you wouldn't even notice you're driving another car. So that's the beauty of factory built cars. They're all much for muchness. If you do feel things will be very minute, but other than that, yeah, you can close your eyes and think it's the same car.
You'll fit right in. Quick question on the New Zealand stuff now, just breaking away from Europe. Will you drive the Rally 2 car at Otago initially?
Well, that's on the cards. We're waiting to see what happens next week in Portugal. We're still waiting on some parts and bits and pieces to get everything complete. So, yeah, we're looking to finalise exactly what we're doing straight after Portugal. The AP4 is getting used for New Zealand Hill Climb Champs as soon as we get back from Portugal. So that car's already up and running, the motor and everything. The rally spec motor for that's ready to go in if and when needed. So yeah, it's actually a nice luxury to have an option of which car to take. It's not often you're in this situation. So yeah, we just have to assess. But yeah, it's probable we'll use the Rally 2 car. That's commercially makes sense. But as I say, we just need to make sure we get some parts and that's ready to go.
For Portugal, it's the first event on the ERC calendar. It uses some of the old Rally Portugal stages that you would have some good experience on. Do you plan to reuse notes from previous years based on the stages that you are familiar with?
No, we've had a look through the onboards. There's nothing really of much use. There's a bit of the old famous FAF stage and things that we've done. But generally, a lot of the other stuff I haven't done so much of. So, yeah, we're going back 5 years now, so it's just easy to start again. The conditions, it looks like it's going to be very different. So when we did the WRC rally, it was always dry. It looks like we're going to have another wet FAF rally, which turns into a bit of a mud hole. So it's just easy to start again. But yeah, it's going to be, as I said earlier, like when I looked at the entry list initially, pretty much everyone in the top 35 is at least capable of a top 10, and you'll take the other half of that again and probably be capable of a podium. So it's going to be a really tough rally to manage speed versus championship because of those 35, we also have to evaluate that maybe only 15 of them are, for example, serious full-time contenders for the whole championship. So yeah, it's going to be a matter of weighing it all up as the rally goes on because ultimately we're there for a championship and that doesn't mean you have to win the first rally.
Definitely. Latvia, Poland, they've obviously rallies you've done before as well, and Sweden is there as well in the middle of the year. Won't be on snow, but there might be some stages that have been used previously at Rally Sweden. Do you approach the new events in ARC differently to what you would rallies you've done previously, or have you done so many brand new events that they're all pretty similar nowadays?
Yeah, it's pretty irrelevant. Obviously, if you've done a stage lots of times, you become pretty, second nature with it. So you probably just drive it a little bit quicker naturally. But other than that, nowadays, the processes you have in place with pace notes and reviewing your pace notes after the recce and even all the footage that's available of all the events prior to the event, you can get up to a pretty good level before you get there, whether it's new or not. So yeah, all the gravel rallies we have an aspect of some knowledge, so that'll always help us. Obviously, you're going to get fast locals at each of the rallies as well. Our biggest challenge will be the 3 tarmac rallies at the end, but then potentially that's where the other tyre brands maybe not as strong as the Pirellis compared to the gravel, for example. So there's a few pros and cons, but you just have to play it by ear. We've seen too often in the ERC in the past how the championship ebbs and flows. It may only be 7 rallies, but there's a lot of stuff that happens throughout those 7 rallies. So, yeah, we just got to keep our wits about ourselves.
And then when it goes to tarmac at the end of the year, it's your least preferred surface, I would say. were those events last year in the UK and also in Italy, I believe, were they, I guess, with an eye forward to either the WRC2 or the ERC program for this year?
Well, a lot of the tarmac stuff we've done in the past is really just to show people we're not as weak on tarmac as what we have been thought to be in the past. The reality of it is, back in the WRC days, to be fair, we probably didn't have the strongest package on tarmac compared to the other WRC teams, and you only had to look at the results of our teammates at the time. They were tarmac specialists and they weren't winning rallies, and we were able to be competitive with them. So I always felt we had a bit of a bad rap on tarmac. I didn't fully agree with it. The only thing I would agree was wet tarmac. Yeah, I don't like wet tarmac, but dry tarmac, I actually enjoy dry tarmac. But no, wet tarmac, you're just driving with your butt cheeks clenched all the time. So there's nothing fun about that. But the dry tarmac I really enjoy. So, and I think if these the tarmac rallies we're doing this year, predominantly they should normally be dry, or even if they're a bit damp or wet, it's fine. But everything I've done at the racetrack here, while I've been living at the racetrack for the last 4 or 5 years, has put me in a much stronger position than what I was back in the WRC days. So I'm comfortable on tarmac. I think of those 3 tarmac rallies at the end of the season. Burrum looks very challenging. That's got a lot of history of being a very shiny, very slick tarmac. So it can almost be a bit Monte Carlo like if it's wet. So that'll be the biggest challenge. But Rome and Hungary, they look like really nice events that I think we will enjoy.
The logistics of moving around Europe, your team's based in New Zealand, you're based in New Zealand. It'll be a part Kiwi team on the event, is that right? It must come with some challenges to move people around and to get people there.
Yeah, well, we've got our main technician from here, Mike, coming over with us to Portugal, and then we'll assess how it's all working with the team and everything from there. So for sure, we'd like to have some of our people involved. For sure, we'll definitely have people involved here on the ground, whether that's before the events or during the events or helping us with information or data or whatever it may be. But yeah, the cost of moving people around is certainly hard. So we have to see what value we can add to the program this year, and see where it's at, I guess. So, but yeah, no, long term going forward, we want to be moving all our people around. But to be doing that, you need much bigger budgets than what we currently have, or we need to own our own team plane or something. So yeah, we'll just have to play that on by ear. But as I say, we're working towards something in 2025. That's the plan. That's the goal. And in the meantime, the focus of that is really about keeping our name over there, and that's really about the image or what people see from the outside.
And delivering for Kiwi companies when you're in Europe, it must be a bit difficult because you're so removed from, I guess, New Zealand, but competing in New Zealand obviously helps that. How do you deliver for those Kiwi companies when you are overseas?
Yeah, it is more difficult, but in saying that, we're working with WRC promoters who are obviously promoting the ERC, so they're able to supply a lot of good content. Then you've obviously got your all live channel, so your motorsport fans will still tune in. It's just trying to get out to the masses, which is more of interest to our partners. So luckily we've got good support here through our media. We've got our own media manager in house who's obviously feeding material into the media channels, and it's really just about trying to get it out there as much as we can. And at the end of the day, if you're winning or if you're competitive, no matter where you're around the world, people will follow you or get behind you as well. So there's an aspect that's on me as well to make sure that we do a good job.
Moving on from Europe, there's a couple of things coming up down under for you. We've previously talked about the Otago Rally, but the Adelaide Motorsport Festival is first up almost as soon as you get back from Europe. It was a bit of a shock to me when your name was announced on the list with the EV car. How did that come about? And I guess, how come you're taking the EV over to Adelaide?
Well, it come about, I think, over a year ago, actually. They were trying to get it over for another event in Adelaide, and then the opportunity come up with this one, in conjunction with Hyundai Australia, to try and get the car over there as a bit of a promotional piece. So, I guess all the stars aligned, and for me personally, we want to start spreading the wings on that car and that project a little bit in terms of, okay, we're still waiting on the new battery, which will allow us to do a rally, which should be in the car this year. But in the meantime, there's an opportunity to get it across the Tasman and actually start showing more people it, because, at the end of the day, I'm a petrol head like anyone else in the sport. But this car is exciting, it is cool, and it does change a lot of people's perception once they actually see it. There's a lot of people who, especially keyboard warriors, who want to sit back and be all negative about it, and not look at the big picture. but once they actually, as I say, see it in the flesh, see it driving around, it can help, I guess, for people to adapt a little bit more to the idea of it. So, yeah, look forward to bringing it over there. We're just doing some demonstrations. I think we've got a few sets of old rally tyres in the container, so it'll be all about going around the track there sideways and putting them on a bit of tyre smoke and have a bit of fun.
Great stuff. It was definitely good to watch at Rally New Zealand the couple of times that I saw it. A week later, you'll be in Otago, probably in the Rally 2 car, like you mentioned. Will the Rally 2 car be better or worse on those stages, or is it just going to be a mix, like you say?
I think for Otago, it's a mix of these fast and twisty stages, so it's 50-50 between AP4 and Rally 2. The Rally 2 car would be better for all the North Island rallies, and probably the only rally where an AP4 would have an advantage at this stage, based on the current calendar, because the calendar might change, obviously, unfortunately, with the cyclone. But it's Timaru Rally. Timaru Rally is an out-and-out AP4 rally, just because of the high speeds. So, yeah, I think for Otago, whatever car we have, it won't make any difference.
I'm going to skim over the rest of the Otago stuff and come on to the last stage, which is obviously a lot of the time Koori Bush. Every time I get to Dunedin, I try and drive it, as you do clearly a number of times when you're there. It's sort of a half serious, half not question here, but is John Kennard just ballast at this point when you do that stage?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, I know it pretty well. But to be honest, even though you know where you're going, and it doesn't matter if you've done a stage 10, 12, 15 times, the pace notes are still a prompt for what I do.
Yeah.
So if I drove it without pace notes, yeah, I know where the road's going, but I don't think I'll drive it as fast because, yeah, it's a weird one to explain. How you react, how you brake, how you use the gears is all a direct correlation to the pace notes I'm hearing. So, yeah, you almost feel naked when you haven't got the pace notes. You just feel, not quite right. So, no, I definitely need John in there with the pace notes. He's more than just Palace. And it means two of us get to enjoy the ride as well, rather than just one.
That's right. I guess the stage record will be in danger, I guess, if the Rally 2 car is quicker than the AP4 car there, I guess.
Yeah, well, that's probably one of the quickest stages of the rally, though. So it'd be interesting. It'd actually be super interesting to know what the time difference would be between a Rally 2 and AP4 there. The one thing I do really want to do is I want to get and unfortunately our battery's going to be a little bit too late, but we keep talking to the organisers about getting the EV to at least do that stage because I think the record's 6 minutes and 11 or 12 or something like that, or 7, whatever it is. So I really want to break that minute barrier. So we probably can't do that with a Rally 2 and AP4 because 11 or 12 seconds is too much. But I think the EV car, I reckon we could do that. So won't be this year, but it'd be nice that next year we can maybe look at doing it.
Watch this space. You got to promise though that if the record gets broken, you got to share the onboard, surely.
Yeah, but I get conscious that it becomes a bit old as well. It's becoming so talked about, and there's so many onboards of it. It becomes a bit repetitive, doesn't it? So, maybe we need to go quiet on that stage for a few years just to let it build up again, and then come back in again.
Maybe. Thanks so much for your time, Hayden. It's been really cool to chat. You've got a busy schedule and a huge 2023 coming up. So I appreciate you taking some time. Best of luck and give it heaps.
Awesome. I appreciate that. Thanks very much.